The sun had just dipped below the skyline when Jonathan Merrow pulled his hoodie over his head and stepped out of his sleek, unmarked black SUV. This wasn't his usual entrance. No fanfare, no personal driver, no tailored suit. Tonight he wore oil-stained jeans he hadn't touched in years and an old flannel shirt his ex-wife begged him to throw away. To the outside world, Jonathan was the cold-blooded billionaire who built Merrow Motors from the ground up, a legend in the luxury automotive industry. But underneath that polished image was a man who hadn't felt connected to the business in years. It had become too clean, too distant. He missed the grit, the realness, the kind of sweat and labor that used to drip off his hands when he first started working with engines at 17. He owned 8 garages in different parts of the state, each one built during his early expansion years. Most now ran independently, keeping his name more as a badge of honor than as a sign of ownership. This one in the outskirts of Dayton hadn't seen him in years. He didn't call ahead, didn't text, just drove. As he entered through the side door, the sharp metallic scent of grease and burnt rubber hit him like a wave of nostalgia. It felt like stepping back in time. He kept his head down, the dim fluorescent lights barely catching the edges of his face. A low humming came from the back, rhythmic and metallic, someone working late. He followed the sound, boots echoing lightly across the concrete floor. Then he saw him. The mechanic stood tall and muscular, his dark skin gleaming with sweat under the flickering light. He wore a tight, sleeveless shirt soaked through with work, veins bulging as he maneuvered an angle grinder across a piece of raw metal. Sparks danced around him, dangerously close to his bare arms, but he didn't flinch. His eyes, sharp, focused, intense, never left his work. Jonathan paused in the shadows. Something about the way the man handled the tool, how precise and fearless he was, felt unusual. Most mechanics he knew were cautious. This guy was artful but aggressive, like the machine owed him something, like he had something to prove to it. The tool screeched to a stop. The man leaned back, panting, brushing metal shavings from his skin. Then he turned toward the shelf behind him and noticed Jonathan standing there. "You lost, old man," he said, voice deep and unapologetic. Jonathan smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe I just came to see if this place still had soul." The man snorted. "Soul? You one of those rich guys who thinks he can rediscover his roots?" Jonathan chuckled. "Something like that." He stepped forward, careful not to break the moment. "You always work like that? No gloves, no shield?" The mechanic gave a sarcastic grin. "You afraid I'll hurt myself? Don't worry. I've been burned worse than a couple sparks. Name? Darius, good name. Yours? James." Jonathan lied with ease. He wasn't ready to be the CEO tonight. Darius narrowed his eyes. "You from around here, James?" "Used to be, before I forgot what a wrench felt like." Darius wiped his hands on a rag and tossed it aside. "You here to watch, or you planning to help?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "You let strangers help in your shop?" "No," Darius said flatly, "but you don't look like a cop. And anyone who walks in here wearing jeans older than me probably knows what they're doing." Jonathan smirked. It felt good to be seen not as a tycoon, but as a man. He rolled up his sleeves. As they worked side by side, something strange unfolded. Jonathan noticed Darius wasn't just skilled. He was a mechanical savant. He modified parts on the fly, made adjustments that seemed counterintuitive, but worked perfectly. There was no manual in sight. Just instinct, precision, risk. The kind of risk Jonathan hadn't seen in decades, but behind Darius's cool exterior was something else. A storm. He never looked at Jonathan for too long, never smiled for real. It was as if every movement came from a place of anger. He'd learned to tame through the sound of grinding metal. Jonathan couldn't help but wonder, what happened to this man? And more importantly, how the hell had someone like Darius ended up here, buried in one of his forgotten garages where no one was watching? Jonathan returned the next night. He didn't plan to, not really. But after he'd showered off the grease and sat in his empty penthouse, the silence felt like a punishment. Every polished marble floor and imported crystal glass mocked him. His empire, once a symbol of pride, had become a cage. so he put the hoodie back on and drove. The garage was quieter this time, just the buzzing of a radio set to some local R&B station and the occasional clank of metal on metal. Jonathan slipped in again through the side unnoticed, until Darius spoke without turning around. "You're back." Jonathan smiled, stepping toward the same corner they'd worked in the night before. "Guess I didn't get enough." Darius handed him a wrench without looking. "Hope you know you're tightening that alternator bracket tonight. Last guy who touched it messed it up." Jonathan took it without question and got to work. They didn't talk much for the first hour, just the occasional "pass me that" or "hold it there." But the silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of shared silence you only get between men who've both been hurt by the world in different ways. Eventually, Jonathan broke it. "You run this place alone?" Darius nodded. "Pretty much." "No help? Help doesn't stick around when they see a black man running the show," Darius said simply, "especially one that doesn't play nice." Jonathan looked up from under the hood. "You don't?" Darius smirked. "Not when I've had to fight for every goddamn inch." There it was again, that fire. Controlled, but burning hot behind his calm words. Jonathan set down the wrench. "You ever think of doing something bigger with this? Like starting your own brand, custom builds, street races, high-end stuff?" Darius barked a laugh. "Man, you think I haven't tried? You know how many shops I pitched to? How many investors ghosted me soon as I walked in?" His eyes were hard now. "One even told me straight, 'You're too rough, too urban, not our image.'" Jonathan's stomach turned. That was the language people in his boardroom used too, words that sounded polite but were rotten underneath. Darius crossed his arms, looking Jonathan dead in the eye now. "Why are you asking all this anyway? You some washed-up exec looking for a redemption arc or something?" Jonathan hesitated, tempted to spill the truth, but he wasn't ready. Not yet. So he deflected. "Just think you've got a lot more talent than this garage lets you show." Darius's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Not right away. Then softly, "Talent don't mean shit when your skin makes people nervous." That silence came back again, only heavier this time. Jonathan felt it settle between them, thick and ugly. "You ever think maybe they're just scared of what you could build?" Jonathan said quietly. Darius gave a dry smile. "That's the problem, man. They are. Always have been." They worked. A while longer before Darius finally stepped back, wiping his brow. "You did good tonight. You ever need a job, come find me," he joked. Jonathan chuckled. "Might just take you up on that." But as he walked back to his car later, his mind wasn't on the tools or the work. It was on the company board meeting he had scheduled in 2 days. A meeting where investors would demand flashy numbers and new marketing campaigns. Suddenly he saw a new path, one that didn't involve another ad with a blonde model in a red dress standing beside a hypercar. He saw Darius. He saw real grit, real power, and the question that kept echoing in his head was, would they ever let someone like Darius be the face of Mero Motors? Worse still, would they ever let someone like Darius step into a boardroom without laughing him out? 2 days later, Jonathan sat at the head of a long glass conference table in Mero Motors' main headquarters, a building wrapped in chrome and ego, 12 stories high in downtown Chicago. Outside, traffic buzzed. Inside, the buzz came from old money and newer tech. Across from him sat the board. 9 members, mostly men, mostly white, all in tailored suits and smug confidence. They loved Jonathan. Not because they knew him, but because he printed money for them. They didn't ask about his personal life. They didn't care how many garages he still owned. To them, he was numbers. "We've secured 3 influencer partnerships for the new Voltex Roadster," said Ellie, the youngest VP, as she tapped her tablet. "Projected reach, 14 million impressions in 2 weeks. There were nods, murmurs of approval. Another executive chimed in. "And the investor pitch for Q4 is nearly done, leaning into the luxury minimalism narrative. Clean lines, clean faces." Jonathan frowned. "Clean faces?" The exec blinked. "You know, young, aspirational, market-friendly. We don't want to risk confusing the brand." Gade hit him like a slap in the face. He leaned back in his chair, vision filled not with charts or forecasts, but with Darius, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, skin glowing with effort in a dim garage, building things with his bare hands. That was aspirational. That was power. "Let me ask something," Jonathan said, voice calm but sharp. "If a black mechanic, someone rough around the edges, showed up with a custom build that could smoke any of our flagship models, would you call that market-friendly?" The room froze. One of the board members chuckled nervously. "Depends, is he standing next to the car or in the back?" Laughter followed, light, uneasy. Jonathan didn't smile. Ellie cleared her throat. "John, I'm not sure I follow." He stood up. "I've seen more talent in a beat-up garage last week than in any of our sponsored promo videos. The kind of talent that doesn't fit your clean face narrative, but builds things that speak louder than any influencer." A silence fell across the table. The older execs didn't get it. The younger ones looked confused, maybe curious. "I want to sponsor a builder. A real one. Not a pretty face. Someone who doesn't come from Stanford or Paris Design School. Someone who works with danger." He was met with hesitation, furrowed brows. One of the senior VPs, Conrad, as pale and smug as ever, finally spoke. "And where do you plan to find this diamond in the rough?" Jonathan's gaze narrowed. "Already found him." Conrad's lip curled. "Let me guess, your charity project of the month. A backstreet welder who calls himself a custom designer? You want that in our brand?" Jonathan didn't flinch. "I want truth in our brand." Conrad leaned back. "Truth doesn't sell. Image does." Jonathan smiled coldly. "Then maybe it's time Mero Motors had a new image." The room shifted uncomfortably. A few muttered something about brand risk, reputation control. "Set up a press event," Jonathan said firmly. "I'm bringing him in next month. I want him building live, in front of cameras. Let the world see what real engineering looks like." "And what if he messes up?" Ellie asked softly. Jonathan looked around the room. "Then we'll own it. We'll show the world we believe in something more than filters and legacy." They stared at him, uncertain, but no one challenged him outright. Because when the CEO spoke, even madness had to be respected. Later that night, Jonathan was back at the garage. This time, he didn't come in quietly. He knocked loud, then pushed open the door. Darius looked up from under the hood of a battered 71 Charger. "You again?" Jonathan walked in, holding out a folder. "This time I'm not here to help." Darius wiped his hands and eyed the folder suspiciously. "What's that?" "An opportunity," Jonathan said, "to build the fastest car of your life on a stage the whole world's watching." Darius stared at him for a long time, then laughed. "You serious, James?" Jonathan pulled back the hoodie. "My name's not James," he said. "It's Jonathan Mero, and I want you to help redefine what my company stands for." Darius's smile dropped. "The hell? You're him." Jonathan nodded. For the first time, Darius was speechless. Darius stared at Jonathan like he'd just confessed to being an alien. His hands were still blackened with grease, calloused and shaking slightly, as if he couldn't decide whether to punch him or walk away. "You're Jonathan Mero?" he said, voice low. "The car god, Mr. Luxury, Mr. 8 garages and a private runway?" Jonathan stood still, letting the disbelief settle. "Guilty as charged." Darius scoffed and turned away, pacing across the floor. "You lied to me, man." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." "Same damn thing." Jonathan stepped forward, calm but firm. "If I walked in here as that guy, you wouldn't have let me near a wrench, and I needed to see it for myself. I needed to see you for who you are without my name getting in the way." Darius shook his head. "Nah, you don't get to play street and suit at the same time. You watched me bust my ass with sparks flying in my damn face and just, what? Took notes for your corporate redemption arc?" "It's not that," Jonathan said. "I saw brilliance, Darius. Raw talent. You're doing things under this roof that my engineers wouldn't dare try." "Yeah, because I have to," Darius snapped. "I don't have safety nets and design teams. I got second-hand parts and whatever courage I have left." Jonathan walked over to the Charger and placed the folder down on the hood. "Open it," he said. Darius hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were blueprints. A concept car, sleek, aggressive, a beast made of muscle and steel. Not like the dainty showroom models Mero Motors usually peddled. This one looked angry. It looked like it had something to prove. Darius's eyes scanned the notes. His name was printed at the top of the project brief. Darius Cole, lead builder. He looked up slowly. "You want me to build this?" "From the ground up. 1 month. Full creative control. I've already cleared the space, hired your crew, and signed off on the budget." Darius laughed in disbelief. "Why me?" Jonathan looked him in the eye. "Because you represent everything this industry forgot. Grit, fire, originality. You're not building for likes or market trends. You're building because you have something to say." Darius stared at him for a long time. Then he closed the folder and crossed his arms. "So what's the catch?" "No catch, just pressure. This'll be live. Press, cameras, critics. You'll be judged before you even weld the first joint." Darius raised an eyebrow. "So you think I haven't been judged every day of my damn life?" Jonathan smiled. "Exactly." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Darius slowly nodded. "One condition," he said. "Name it. I don't want no PR puppet master telling me how to dress, talk, or smile for the cameras." Jonathan held out his hand. "Deal." They shook on it. Two men from opposite sides of the world, bound by grease and risk. The next weeks flew like a blur. Jonathan cleared out a massive section of Merrow's industrial testing facility and turned it into a live build zone. Darius showed up every day at 6 a.m., already covered in dirt with a chip on his shoulder and fire in his eyes. His crew, a small group of overlooked mechanics and metalworkers from his neighborhood, followed him like soldiers. The media took notice quickly. Headlines like "Unknown Mechanic, Tapped by CEO to Lead New Build." Merrow's bold bet on C. A rough-edged builder, genius or gimmick. All eyes on Darius Cole. Some were skeptical. Most were racist without saying it out loud. Talk shows called it a corporate experiment. Comment sections buzzed with doubt. But Darius didn't care. He worked with music blasting, tools flying, sometimes welding with nothing but sunglasses, on, defying safety norms, PR norms, every damn norm in the book. He wasn't trying to fit into Merrow's image. He was shoving Merrow into his, and the car, it came alive like something pulled out of a nightmare. A roaring, low-slung machine. That looked like it had teeth, black matte finish, exposed rivets, turbocharged engine that screamed like a banshee. Jonathan watched from the sidelines, amazed, inspired, terrified, because he realized if this worked, Darius wasn't just going to build a car, he was going to change the face of the company, and that meant someone, maybe many, were going to try to stop him. The night before the big unveiling, the build floor was empty except for Darius. He stood alone beside the finished car, his car. No cameras, no crew. Just him and the beast he'd breathed life into with his own hands. It didn't even look like it belonged on Earth. Sharp, aggressive lines. Matte black bodywork that shimmered, under low light like coiled muscle. The exhaust tip still smelled faintly of burnt oil and anger. He exhaled slowly, pride and fear mixing in his chest like gasoline and fire. Then footsteps echoed behind him. Jonathan appeared, hands in his coat, pockets watching the car with a tight smile. "You did it." Darius didn't look at him. "Thought I might have a stroke before that turbo system lined up right. You don't even want to know what kind of Frankenstein setup I had to rig inside that engine bay." Jonathan chuckled. "Don't need to. I trust you." "That's new," Darius said, finally turning to face him. "Most suits don't trust guys like me unless there's a PR team in the room." Jonathan stepped closer, nodding at the car. "They're going to hate this." "I know. They're going to say it's too aggressive, too raw, too black." Darius smiled. "Then they better buckle up." There was a beat of silence before Jonathan's face grew serious. "I need to warn you, the board's not on your side. They agreed to the showcase because they couldn't say no to me. But if this goes wrong, even a little, they'll use it as proof that this kind of change doesn't work. They'll say you were a risk that didn't pay off." Darius's smile faded, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Let them try." "I've been. They'll risk my whole damn life." Jonathan nodded. "Just be ready, there's more than cameras watching tomorrow." Darius looked down at his car, jaw tight. "I've never been more ready." The next day, the press event drew hundreds. Mero Motors hadn't announced Darius's name until the morning of. By noon, he was trending online. Half the comments were celebratory, the other half weren't. He could feel the eyes, the doubt, the waiting for him to fail tension, radiating off of executives in tailored suits and glossy heels. Jonathan stood beside him in front of the black drape covering the car. A spotlight hit the two men. Jonathan stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today's not about another luxury vehicle. It's about revolution. It's about recognizing brilliance where the industry usually doesn't bother to look. This car wasn't designed in a boardroom. It was built with sweat, scars, and skill." Then he stepped aside. "And it was built by him." He gestured to Darius. A ripple moved through the crowd. The skepticism was so loud it didn't need to be spoken. Some clapped slowly. Others crossed their arms, eyeing Darius like he was a stunt. But Darius didn't flinch. He walked up to the mic and adjusted it with one hand, grease still visible beneath his fingernails. "I wasn't born into this world," he said, voice steady. "I didn't go to some fancy design school. I didn't grow up at car expos or watching tech demos. I grew up fixing broken things with broken tools in broken places." He paused, looking around the room. "But the thing about broken things? They teach you how to build." Then he turned and pulled the drape down. Gasps erupted. The car sat like a monster unleashed. Everything about it screamed rebellion. There were no sleek curves or glossy colors, just sharp defiance, a middle finger on four wheels. Some clapped, some didn't. A few board members exchanged looks that screamed, "What the hell is this?" And one, Conrad, turned and walked away without a word. Jonathan noticed. So did Darius, but none of that mattered. Because the car started to trend, first online, then, in real time, mechanics started reposting it. Underground racer forums exploded. Celebrities and auto influencers started praising the raw power aesthetic and post-industrial vibe. One post said it all. "This car feels like the streets finally got a seat at the table." Later that night, Jonathan found Darius in the corner of the event floor, sipping a bottle of water like he hadn't just shaken the foundations of an entire company. "They're already calling you the wrench prophet," Jonathan said with a grin. Darius chuckled. "That sounds ridiculous, maybe. But you turned heads, even the ones that wanted to look away." Darius leaned against the wall, eyes serious now. "So what happens next?" Jonathan glanced toward the crowd of media swarming the car, still taking photos. "What happens next?" he repeated. "We make space." "For who?" Darius asked. Jonathan met his eyes. "For every mechanic who was told they weren't polished enough. Every black builder passed over for someone safer. Every genius working in silence, waiting to be seen." Darius nodded slowly. "About damn time." A week passed. The showcase had gone viral, bigger than Jonathan expected, faster than Mero's media team could handle. Within days, major publications were hounding Darius for interviews. He declined most. He wasn't interested in being a soundbite. He just wanted to build. But the spotlight didn't wait for permission. A profile piece on Auto Trend Weekly dubbed him the mechanic who challenged the machine. It called his build violent artistry and compared him to the Banksy of auto. Design unpredictable, defiant, and impossible to ignore. But with fame came backlash. On Mero's internal Slack channels, some engineers mocked the build as angry cosplay. One board member was overheard saying, "Let the pet project ride out. It'll disappear after the hype dies." They didn't say his name, but they didn't have to. The corporate world had a way of smiling in your face while sharpening knives behind your back. Darius felt it, even if no one said it out loud. The nods that didn't quite reach the eyes, the tension in meetings, the way some execs kept calling him the mechanic instead of the builder. Subtle, polite disrespect. The kind that stung more because it hid behind civility. It got worse after Jonathan made the next move. He called a press conference and announced that Darius would be taking the lead on a limited edition production run of his design. 50 units, all handcrafted, all carrying the name Colex across the hood. That name changed everything. Now Darius wasn't just a feature. He was a threat. Investors got nervous. Auto bloggers speculated whether Jonathan was losing his grip. Racist pundits floated the usual garbage about inclusion going too far. And worst of all, someone leaked Darius's criminal record. Street fight from 8 years ago. A broken jaw, charges dropped. But it was enough, tabloids feasted. Twitter threads exploded with words like thug, liability, and unsafe. Jonathan stormed into the PR office the morning the leak hit. Who leaked? This, he demanded. Blank stares, shrugs. A few flinched, but no one confessed. He slammed the printout of the tabloid on the table. This isn't just about Darius, he said. This is about what this company stands for. If we let this garbage shape the narrative, we go back to being just another soulless machine that builds pretty cars for rich people. One VP spoke up. But John, I am the board now, he snapped. And I'm not going to let a man's past be weaponized against his present. That night, Jonathan called Darius, told him everything, offered to walk away. From the launch if it got too hot. Darius didn't hesitate. Let them dig, I'm not hiding, he said. My record ain't a secret. I've owned every mistake I ever made. And you know what? That fight? I was defending my little brother. Pushed a dude off him who had a knife. Cops showed up, saw my skin before they saw the story. And that was that. Jonathan was quiet on the other end of the line. Not because he was shocked, but because he was angry. Angry that the past, twisted and weaponized, could be used to undermine someone's brilliance. You sure about this? He asked softly. Damn right I am, Darius replied. I didn't come this far just to flinch when they throw dirt. Let 'em throw it, I'll still be standing. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Then we fight. The next morning Darius posted a video. No PR team, no script. Just him in the garage, standing beside the Colex. Yeah, I got a record, he said, straight to camera. You want to define me by a fight I had 8 years ago, be my guest. But don't you dare ignore the fights I've won since then. Every car I fixed without proper parts. Every day I went broke chasing better. Every time I walked into a room full of people who didn't want me there, and stayed. He paused. They can call me dangerous. Hell, maybe I am. But not 'cause of some mugshot. I'm dangerous to the way this game's been played, and that's exactly why I ain't going nowhere. It went viral in less than an hour. Comments poured in. This man's more real than half the CEOs out there. They fear what they can't control. From the garage to greatness, Colex all day. Sales of the limited Colex line surged overnight, but the fight was just beginning. A week later, during a meeting with senior leadership, Jonathan noticed 2 executives conspicuously absent. Conrad Reese, the man who'd walked out during the unveiling, and Margaret Glenmore, a longtime board member with ties to rival automakers. They were working behind the scenes. That much was clear. And then came the blow. A formal motion. Vote to strip Jonathan of his executive power for brand misconduct and reputational risk. The board scheduled it in 2 days. Jonathan sat in his office after hours, staring out over the city. The lights blurred into a haze. He hadn't felt this kind of weight in years, and not for his own name, but for Darius's, because if they came for him, they'd bury Darius right after. He picked up his phone and texted him. They're coming for me. If I go down, they'll try to kill the Colex, Darius responded. A minute later, then we take the garage to war. They called it the Midnight Build. 24 hours before the board vote, Darius posted a live stream from one of Jonathan's garages. Not the corporate showroom, his garage. The raw, untouched one buried beneath his estate where it all began. He didn't just show the car. He opened it up, bolt by bolt, breaking down the build, explaining every decision, every risk, every innovation. Thousands tuned in, then tens of thousands, mechanics, designers, students, street racers, veterans, fans, haters. All of them watched a black man surrounded by torque wrenches and transmission diagrams dismantle the gatekeeping of a new entire industry in real time. And then Jonathan joined the stream. In a hoodie, no tie, no filter. He looked straight into the camera. If the board removes me, he said, let it be known I stood beside Darius Cole. I trusted the hands that built this car more than the suits who only know how to sell it. This isn't just a car, it's a rebellion. If they fire me, we'll take the Colex and build it without them. A comment popped up immediately. Where do I pre-order? Another. The board's gonna learn today. By sunrise, Undercover's revolution was trending across all platforms. People weren't just fans now, they were invested. The morning of the vote, the air inside Merrow Motors headquarters was thick with tension. Executives whispered in glass offices. Assistants passed each other tight smiles. No one was neutral anymore. You were either with the machine or with the mechanic. Jonathan walked into the boardroom alone. No legal team, no notes. Just the quiet weight of knowing the empire he'd built was turning against him. The board members were already seated, eyes sharp and clipped with polite professionalism. Conrad Reese spoke first. "Jonathan, this isn't personal." Jonathan smiled without humor. "Of course not. You just want to kill the most successful campaign this company's had in years." "You've made it personal," Margaret Glenmore added. "You've made him the brand." "Him?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Say his name." Margaret stiffened. "Darius Cole is a talented builder, but he's—" "A risk," Conrad interrupted. "You've exposed the company to serious reputational fallout. Sponsors are concerned. Our partners in Munich are talking about a full pullout. This Cole X revolution is alienating our core market.